Good day, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. So, in this video, we will be discussing about the types of feminism and feminist theory in sociology. So, let's start. So, there are four types of feminism. The first one is liberal feminism, and the second one is social feminism, and the third one is radical feminism, and the fourth one is cultural feminism. So, what is liberal feminism? So, liberal feminism is rooted in classic liberal thought and believes that individuals should be free to develop their own talents and pursue their own interests. This approach sees gender inequalities as rooted in the attitudes of our social and cultural institutions. Liberal feminists do not see women's equality as requiring a reorganization of society, but they do seek to expand the rights and opportunities of women.
Feminism is a particular approach to achieving equality between men and women that emphasizes the power of an individual person to alter discriminatory practices against women.
So, one of four feminisms. In 1983, Alison Jagar published Feminist Politics and Human Nature, where she defined four theories related to feminism: the liberal feminism, the Marxism, the radical feminism, and socialist feminism. So, goals of liberal feminism. What she described as liberal feminism is theory and work that focuses more on issues like equality in the workplace, in education, rights, where liberal feminism looks at issues in the private sphere. It tends to be in terms of equality. How does that private life impede or enhance public equality? Thus, liberal feminists also tend to support marriage as an equal partnership and more male involvement in childcare. Abortion and other reproductive rights have to do with control of one's life choices and autonomy. Ending domestic violence and sexual harassment have to do with removing obstacles to women achieving on an equal level with men. So, liberal feminism's primary goal is gender equality. So, what is gender equality? Gender equality, also known as sexual equality, is the state of sexual equal ease of access to resources and opportunities regardless of gender, including economic participation and decision making, and the state of valuing different behaviors, aspirations, and needs equally regardless of gender. So, liberal feminism's primary goal is gender equality in the public sphere, including equal access to education, equal pay, ending job segregation, better working conditions, won primarily through legal changes. Private sphere issues are of concern mainly as they influence or impede equality in the public sphere. Gaining access to and being paid and promoted equally in traditionally male-dominated occupation is an important goal. What do women want? Liberal feminism answers. Mostly, what men want to get an education, to make a decent living, to provide for one's family. So, liberal feminism means and method. Liberal feminism tends to rely on the state and political rights to gain equality, to see the state as the protector of individual rights. Liberal feminism, for example, supports affirmative action legislation requiring employers and educational institutions to make special attempts to include women in the pool of applicants, on the assumptions that past and current discrimination may simply overlook many qualified women applicants. The Equal Rights Amendment was a key goal for many years of liberal feminists, from the original women's suffrage proponents who moved to advocating a federal equality amendment, to many of the feminists of the 1960s and 1970s in organizations including the National Organization for Women. The text of the Equal Rights Amendment, as passed by Congress and sent to the states in the 1970s, is a classical liberal feminism. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex, while not denying that there may be biologically based differences between men and women. Liberal feminism cannot see these are adequate justification for inequalities such as wage gap between men and women. Critics. Critics of liberal feminism point to a lack of critique of basic gender relationships, a focus on state action which links women's interests to those of the powerful, a lack of class of race analysis, and a lack of analysis of ways in which women are different from men. Critics often accuse liberal feminism of judging women and standards. What is white feminism? White feminism is a kind of liberal feminism which assumes that the issues facing white women are the issues of all women face, and that unity around liberal feminist goal is more important than racial equality and other such goals. Intersectionality was a theory developed in criticisms of liberal feminism's common blind spot on race. In more recent years, a liberal feminism has sometimes been conflated with a kind of libertarian feminism, being sometimes called equity feminism or individual feminism. Individual feminism often opposes legislative or state action, preferring to emphasize developing the skills and abilities of women to compete better in the world as it is. This feminism opposes laws that give both men and women advantages and privileges. The second type of feminism is socialist feminism. What is socialist feminism? Is slightly less extreme but still calls for major social change. Socialist feminism is a movement that calls for an end to capitalism through a socialist reformation of our economy. Basically, socialist feminism argues that capitalism strengthens and argues sexiest status quo because men are the ones who currently have power and money. Thus, men are more willing to share their power and money with other men, which means that women are continually given fewer opportunities and resources. Socialist feminism addresses women's inequality in a two-pronged approach, which is connecting capitalism and patriarchy and proving that patriarchy isn't the sole source of oppression. The first objective is often referring to women's limited roles in society, staying at home and raising a family as a major factor in their oppression. The second object aims to show that women can experience it in various other ways, including race, class, sexual orientation, and education, among others. The history of socialist feminism. The term socialist feminism might make it sound as though the two concepts socialism and feminism are cemented together and intertwined. But this has not always been the case. Socialist Party leader Eugene V. Debs and Susan B. Anthony were at odds back in 1905, each of them supporting a different end of the spectrum. Decades later, Gloria Steinem suggested that women, and particularly younger women, were eager to throw their support behind socialist Bernie Sanders rather than Hillary Clinton, a concept that became evident in the 2016 national election when Sanders won 53% of the female vote in the New Hampshire primary in contrast to Clinton's 46%. How is socialist feminism different? Socialist feminism has often been compared to cultural feminism, but they are quite different, although there are some similarities. Cultural feminism focuses almost exclusively on the unique traits and accomplishment of the female gender in opposition to those of men. Separatism is a key theme, but socialist feminism opposes this. The goal of socialist feminism is to work with men to achieve a level playing field for both genders. Socialist feminists have referred to cultural feminism as pretentious. Feminism is also distinctly different from liberal feminism, although the concept of liberal feminism has changed over the early decades of the 21st century. Although liberal feminists seek equality of the sexes, socialist feminists do not believe that is entirely possible within the constraints of current society. The focus of radical feminists is more on the root cause of inequalities that exist. They tend to take the position that sexual discrimination is the sole source of the oppressions of women. However, radical feminism may be more closely related than some other forms of feminism are to socialist feminism. The third types of feminism, the radical feminism. Radical feminism is a philosophy emphasizing the patriarchal roots of inequality between men and women, or more specifically, social dominance of women by men. Radical feminism views patriarchy as dividing rights, privileges, and power primarily by sex, and as a result oppressing women and privileging men. Radical feminism opposes existing political and social organization in general because it is inherently tied to patriarchy. Thus, radical feminists tend to be skeptical of political action within the current system and instead tend to focus on culture change that undermines patriarchy and associated hierarchical structures. Roots of radical feminism. Radical feminism was rooted in the wider radical movement, where women participated in anti-war and new left political movements of the 1960s, finding themselves excluded from equal power by the men within the movement, even with underlying theories of empowerment. Many of these women split off into specifically feminist groups, while still retaining much of their political radical ideals and methods. Then, radical feminism became the term used for the more radical edge of feminism. Radical feminism is credited with the use of consciousness raising groups to raise awareness of women's oppressions. So, radical feminism points out that our society is based on understanding the world through the eyes of men and not women. Radical feminism believes that the oppression of women goes so deep that it will take a significant overhaul of existing society to make the world more fair to women. Issues for radical feminists include: first, the reproductive rights for women, including freedom to make choice to give birth, have an abortion, use birth control, or get sterilized. Second, evaluating and then breaking down traditional gender roles in private relationships as well as in public policies. Third, understanding pornography as an industry and practice leading to harm to women, although some radical feminists disagreed with this position. Fourth, understanding rape as an expression of patriarchal power, not a seeking of sex. Fifth, understanding prostitution under patriarchy as oppression of women, sexually and economically. A critique of motherhood, marriage, the nuclear family, and sexuality, questioning how much of our culture is based on patriarchal assumptions of women. And the last one is a critique of other institutions, including government and religions, as centered historically in patriarchal power. Tools used by radical women's groups included consciousness raising groups actively providing services, organizing public protest, and putting on art and culture events. Women's studies programs at universities were often supported by radical feminists as well as more liberal and socialist feminists. Some radical feminists promoted a political form of lesbianism or celibacy as alternatives to heterosexual sex within an overall patriarchal culture. There remains the disagreement with the radical feminist community about transgender equality, identity rather. Some radical feminists have supported the rights of transgender people, seeing it as another gender liberation struggle. Some have opposed the transgender movement, seeing it as embodying and promoting patriarchal gender norms. So, the last type of feminism is cultural feminism. What is cultural feminism? Cultural feminism is a variety of feminism which emphasizes racial differences between men and women based on biological differences in reproductive capacity. Cultural feminism attributes to those differences distinctive and superior virtues in women. What women share in this perspective provides a basis for sisterhood or unity, solidarity, and shared identity. Thus, cultural feminism also encourages building a shared women's culture. So, cultural feminism is a philosophy that men and women have different approaches to the world around them, and that greater value should be placed on the way women approach the world. In some cases, cultural feminism, cultural feminism argues that a woman's way of looking at the world is actually superior to men's. This world is actually, this perspective aims to unite all women, regardless of ethnicity, race, class, or age. Essential differences refers to the belief that gender differences are part of the essence of females or males, that the differences are not chosen but are part of the nature of woman or man. Cultural feminists differ as to whether these differences are based on biology or enculturation. Those who believe differences are not genetic or biological, but are cultural, conclude that women's essential qualities are so ingrained by culture that they are persistent. So, women's essential, or the female essence. So, the essence of being a woman is what makes women special and different compared to men, according to this view. This female essence, or women's essential, includes a greater emphasis on cooperation, relationships, and peace, also referred to as an ethic of care. Cultural feminists can either believe that being more nurturing is biologically determined, or they might believe that this trait was taught to them by society, or some combination of both. Cultural feminists also tend to value qualities identified with women as superior or unpreferable to qualities identified with men, whether the qualities are products of nature or culture. The emphasis, in the words of critic Sheila Robotham, is on living a liberated life. Some cultural feminists as individuals are active in social and political change. History. Many of the early cultural feminists were first radical feminists, and some continue to use that name, though moving beyond the model of transforming society. A kind of separatism or vanguard orientation, building alternative communities and institutions, grew in reaction to the 1960s movements for social change, with some concluding that social change was not possible. Cultural feminism has been linked with a growing consciousness of lesbian identity, borrowing from lesbian feminism ideas including the valuing of female connectedness, women-centered relationships, and a women-centered culture. The term cultural feminism dates back at least to the use of it in 1975 by Brooke Williams of Red Stockings, who used it to denounce it and distinguish it from its roots in radical feminism. Other feminists denounce cultural feminism as betraying feminist central ideas. Alice Eccles describes this as the depoliticization of radical feminism. So, cultural feminists overlap with radical feminists. However, their solution is not about completely uprooting beliefs about men and women. The movement is about finding ways to make the female essence a more appreciated part of society, and using women's special gifts to continue positively to the world. The belief includes the idea that women in leadership positions would be more likely than men to cultivate a more peaceful, less war-torn world. K. Ideas. Cultural feminists argue that they define as traditional male behaviors, including aggressiveness, competitiveness, and domination, are harmful to society and to particular fields within cultural feminists within society, including business and politics. Instead, the cultural feminist argues emphasizing caring, cooperation, and egalitarianism would make a better world. Those who argue that women are biologically or inherently more kind, caring, nurturing, and then for more inclusion of women in decision-making processes in cooperative, also argue society and in particular fields within society. Cultural feminists advocate for: first, equal valuing of female occupations including parenting. Second, respecting childcare in the home. Third, paying wages or salary so that staying home is economically viable. Fourth, respecting female values of care and nurturing. Fifth, working to balance a culture that overvalues male values of aggression and undervalues female values of kindness and gentleness. Then, creating rape crisis centers and women's shelters, open in cooperation with other kinds of feminists. Then, emphasizes on the shared values of women from white, African American, and other cultures more than on the differences of women in different groups. Then, a female sexuality that is based on an equality of power, based on mutuality rather than control, based on non-polarized rules, and refuses to recreate sexual hierarchies. Difference Differences with other kinds of feminism. The three main aspects of cultural feminism that are critiqued by other kinds of feminism have been essentialism, the idea that male and female differences are part of the essence of male and female, separatism, an idea of a feminist vanguard, building the new culture rather than transforming the existing one through political and other challenges. While a radical feminist might critique the traditional family as being an institution of patriarchy, a cultural feminist might work to transform the family by focusing on the nurturing and caring that a woman centered family can provide in life. Eccles wrote in 1989, radical feminism was a political movement dedicated to eliminating the sex class system, whereas cultural feminism was a countercultural movement aimed at reversing the cultural valuation of the male and the devaluation of the female. Liberal feminists critique radical feminism for essentialism, often believing instead that male or female differences in behaviors or values are a product of current society. Liberal feminists oppose the depoliticization of feminism which is embodied in cultural feminism. Liberal feminists also critique the separatism of cultural feminism, preparing, preparing to work within the system. Cultural feminists critique accept male values and behavior as the norm to work for inclusion into. Socialist feminists emphasize the economic basis of inequality, while cultural feminists root social problems in the devaluing of women's natural tendencies. Cultural feminists reject the idea that oppression of women is based on the class power exercised by men. To sum up the types of feminism, so liberal feminism fights for complete gender equality through social, political, and legal means. So, liberal feminism does not believe in men and women differentiation. They argue that both men and women are human beings and therefore their common humanity supersedes their procreative differentiation. They claims that gender differences have no connection with biological makeup of a person and therefore they should be ignored. So, the goal of liberal feminist. The ultimate goal of liberal feminism is freeing women from oppressive gender rules and sexual and gender inequalities. It also aims at advancing women in social, political, and economic spheres of life. If there's a goal of liberal feminists, there is also criticisms on liberal feminism. One of the biggest criticism on liberal feminism is its acceptance of male values as universal. In their analysis, most of the time, liberal feminists have presented their views by keeping men stuck. Photo is mainly showing an example of socialist feminism. So, socialist feminism is the idea that patriarchy and capitalism are intertwined forms of exploitation and oppression of women. In addition to emphasizing gender inequality as a cultural force that stems from patriarchy, socialist feminists focus on how the economic system, particularly in capitalist economies, is a source of oppression. Social feminists aim to dismantle this structure to achieve liberation. So this photo is mainly showing of an example of radical feminism. So radical feminism is a philosophy emphasizing the patriarchal roots of inequality between men and women, or more specifically, the social domination of women by men. Radical feminism views patriarchy as dividing societal rights, privileges, and power primarily along the lines of sex, and as a result, oppressing women and privileging men. So, so this photo is mainly showing of an example of cultural feminism. So cultural feminism is the view that there is a female nature or female essence or women essential. It is to attempts to revoke and redefine attributes ascribed to femaleness. It is also used to describe theories that commend innate differences between women and men. No copyright infringement intended. Pictures belong to the rightful owners. Your attention today, and that brings us to end. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you so much for your interest and attention.